Meanwhile, it's expected to be a big day today for President Trump. He'll be addressing the nation tonight in a primetime address. So he has suggested that he's going to be focusing on free and fair elections and also teasing what he calls one of the most important speeches in his presidency, while offering very few details on what he plans to unveil. So this could mean that he revisits the long-debunked conspiracy theories about his 2020 defeat with Democrat Joe Biden, including his issues with the election here in Georgia and about election systems. So on Tuesday in the Oval Office, he said, quote, "It doesn't get much bigger because without free and fair elections, you don't have a country." He went on to say, quote, "We'll be discussing other things, too, but it's going to be a very big announcement." So we are diving into that right now, talking about, what could be the discussion tonight in that primetime address. So joining us to preview that, we have Professor Alain Sanders. He's the Professor Emeritus of Political Science at St. Peter's University. So it's so good to have you with us, Professor Sanders. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Elise.
Of course. All right. Let's get into this now. What do you think will end up being the focus? What do you think we'll be hearing the most of today from the president?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, he's teasing it as dealing with election integrity, but he says other things will be discussed, too. Certainly, a lot of people want to know about Iran since conflict has resumed over there, and I think that's what many people would want to hear most. In terms of election integrity, well, if the president merely repeats what he has said now for 6 years, and all of the claims that he's made about fraud and an unfair election have been debunked in the courts by independent investigations, by Democratic investigations, even by Republican investigations, people will say, well, what are you doing here? You're not focusing on what the American people really want to hear, which is what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening on the economy in terms of making things more affordable. If he unveils new allegations, of course, the Democrats and independent analysts and fact checkers will take a look at what he says and whether it actually bears the weight of truth. And of course, Republicans are very nervous as well because they fear that if the president focuses on something that didn't happen 6 years ago, that's not going to help their midterm election campaigns where they want to point out what they believe are Republican achievements so that they can hold on to control of the Congress.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you said, though, about what the American people want to hear, which, it goes against what the president is planning on talking about today. So why do you think that remains such a central issue in his political message?
Well, I think many analysts are saying that the president is really acting in desperation. He knows that his political standing is low. He knows that the Republican face the possibility of losing one house and maybe even two houses in the midterm elections. All of his efforts at trying to restrict voting, mail-in voting, requiring citizenship validations for voting, all of those things have not worked very well. The courts have ruled against him on so many of his efforts, and so many people believe this may be one last giant attempt to try and sway voters to vote a Republican in the midterm elections.
So what do you think about how this message then might be received by supporters, by critics, by independent voters? I mean, what do you foresee this being the case if he does, in fact, truly focus on this tonight?
Well, I think people always say, because it's true, that he could energize MAGA voters, and that's what he wants to do. But what people often forget to mention is for every igniting the fire under MAGA voters, it ignites the fire of those who oppose the president. So ultimately, it tends to neutralize, and it really depends on what people in the middle really think. And so we'll have to wait and see.
Certainly so. So we've talked a lot about this part of what could be included in the president's address. Any other thoughts on what he might touch on during this primetime speech?
Well, Republicans are hoping that he'll focus on the economy, specifically the housing bill that was recently passed. That was a bipartisan bill that aims to reduce the cost of housing long term. And the president really has sidestepped that, doesn't want to talk about that bill. And Republicans are flummoxed about that. I mean, this is one of the major economic achievements that I think Republicans want to point to. But the president is really focused on his personal grievances. And that does not help Republicans in the midterm elections.
All right, there you go, talking about this address from the president, one that he calls very, very important, happening tonight at 9 here on Fox 5. So Professor Alain Sanders, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at St. Peter's University, thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 5 News Live.
Thank you. Have a great day, Elise.
You too. We appreciate that.